Alright, it only took people several years of asking me to make a video about the bat'leth to finally do it. I mean, they've been asking at least since the time I made a video about the mechleth, which was, what, in 2014? That's only like 7 years ago. Oh boy. Created at a time before smug, sarcastic sword nerds started peeing in everyone's cornflakes with their realism. Famously used by Namekian rebels against the Geth stormtroopers at the Stargate on Battlestar Galactus. Jokes aside, the first bat'leth was made by Kahless the Unforgettable from a lock of his own hair in a volcano and quenched in a lake. When you think about it in terms of material composition, you might call this bullshenanigans. There's no way this makes any sense. I mean, sure, hair contains carbon, among other things, and carbon is used to turn iron into steel, fair enough. But what about lava? Lava is liquid rock. It may contain iron, but also a bunch of other things, and if you know anything about bladesmithing, impurities are not something you want. But whatever, all that aside, again, it might be allegorical. Kahless also created a martial arts system with controlled, deliberate movements that require mental focus, which may contain a Klingon's natural berserker impulses. You know, rather than just yielding to the bloodlust and swinging this bat'leth just like a metal club, basically. This is a system with more efficient movements that use the peculiar features of this weapon. Like the ability to alternate between different grips and use the weapon in a fluid way. You know, you can switch between single-handed, two-handed use. You have different options. You know, all of this, that gives you plenty of possibilities other than just rushing in and hacking at anything that moves, as demonstrated by Worf's badass one-handed block here. So this design has offensive and defensive elements. Before I get into that, just a few words about this one here in particular. It was made by Quinn Waterfield. Links down below. If you want to commission something from him, you can. Now this is a little bit different than the ones in the series and movies. I should have given him more specifics and reference material to make it closer to the original. This design is, in overall shape, it's straighter. It's not quite as curved, but it's more strongly curved toward the ends. One issue with this one here is that the openings for the hand are smaller, which does create problems. Like I can barely fit the hand in here. With gloves, I basically wouldn't be able to use this. You have to kind of ignore that and kind of go with it. We'll see some test footage with this, and some of the issues that I had won't quite apply with the original design. But either way, it still serves to illustrate some of the practical challenges, advantages. Like I said, it has offensive and defensive elements. The original has this aggressive forward-oriented shape. It's more strongly curved, pointed toward the enemy. But at the same time, it also allows you to catch attacks on this. And the ability to hook and control the opponent's weapon is definitely useful to keep yourself safe. So that's the original. What about the new design in Star Trek Discovery? They wanted to change the character of the weapon, the feel of it.
We wanted to re-explore our Klingons as more of a defensive, trying to protect your honor and your world, simply turn them backwards.
Personally, I hate this thing. Defense is not really what comes to my mind in case of a weapon that threatens the user, potentially.
The good thing about this design is you can't stab yourself on the leg. Star Trek Discovery, and they curved them backwards. I don't think it's a good idea.
That's not a good idea.
You're definitely going to stab yourself.
Plus, it's so over-designed. It's got way too much stuff going on. You know, there's too much texture, too much just kind of random stuff. Simple is better in a lot of cases. Not always, but there's just visually, it's way too cluttered. The original is so much more effective visually. There's a certain brutal simplicity to it. All right, let's look at the handling and performance of this particular interpretation here.
It's all kinds of jagged. All right, you Starfleet bottle.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get it between the two. Jesus.
I can just do a sword swing. I can just about cram my hands in there. Ooh, that was easy. It literally forced the stick through it. Yeah, that's what happened. There we go. Clunk. It sounded heavy.
That was interesting.
I came in and then I knocked my hand against the pumpkin. I haven't actually thought about that before. Like, even if you manage to slice or you know, push, eventually your hand is going to hit the target and it's going to stop. So that's fine. Shows you how easy pumpkin is to cut. You just go.
Yeah.
It's definitely not easy to handle. I mean, most weapons aren't technically easy. Swords aren't supposed to be easy either, at least if you want to use them properly. One thing I noticed was that edge alignment is kind of difficult. If I just hold it and just slightly relax my grip, it immediately turns. So the way it's balanced, it basically wants to be like this. You don't want to smack them with a flat, of course. But, of course, that's a feature that you have with a lot of asymmetrical weapons. An axe does the same thing because of the way it's weighted. So that's really just more of a matter of practicing with it and getting better with it. What could be a problem is the weight. Here's a source.
Computer, I want a Klingon batleth, tip to tip 116 centimeters, weight 5.3 kilos.
5.3 kilograms? That's almost 12 pounds. That's more than this giant processional sword, which is over 2 meters long and not intended for actual fighting. It's a ceremonial object. They just carried it around during parades. Even the heaviest great swords that you can find, which are actually intended for fighting, they typically don't weigh much more than 2.5, 3, maybe 3.5 kilos, something like that. They really aren't all that heavy. For a weapon of this size, that seems nuttier than squirrel poop. Now, of course, Klingons are significantly stronger than humans. This one right here weighs around 3 kilograms, which is 6 pounds, 10 ounces. Same as this replica right here from Ravenforge. So it's quite a bit lighter, but we're still in greatsword and polearm territory here. For a Klingon, I think 3 kilograms is totally fine. 5 is a bit much, it's a bit unnecessary. They could probably still handle it, but they would be faster, more agile, and would have more endurance with a 3 kilogram one. And it really doesn't need to be that heavy. You can tweak it by adjusting the thickness. Now, Quinn was skeptical about how much thinner this one could be without compromising its structural integrity. But particularly with high-tech metal alloys, you should be able to make it thinner and still get away with it. It's just Basically, it's a compromise between speed and durability. You can work around it by using the momentum. So instead of me trying to stop it after the swing right there, I could just follow through and come around, which is one of the things that characterizes this design, the ability to flow from one attack to another, change grips any way you want, which is good. And of course, if you hold it like this, then the weight distributes quite favorably. This is not a problem at all to swing around. I just found that the sword grip basically is way more effective for striking, because this way you hit hardest, you can still control it pretty well. The part that goes past the grip, this you can use no problem. You can cut with it, you can chop with it, you can pierce, all of that. So is this a practical weapon or is it stupid? I don't think it's stupid. In fact, I think it's a very intelligent design for the setting that they went for. It's a very creative, unique design. It's difficult to come up with something entirely new that has never been made before in history. In fact, you pretty much always find something that's at least similar, almost no matter what you come up with, unless what you come up with is completely ludicrously useless in practical terms. Interestingly, there are some very similar designs in real life from China, like deer horn knives, for example. This is sort of like a single-handed miniature version of a batleth. You also have a blade that doubles as a guard and forward swept points right here. So these would be used in a pair, so useful for parrying, hooking, grappling, things like that. And also something that's translated as a sun and moon knife or sometimes universe knife. This is very similar to the batleth and a few other variations which also are the same kind of idea. Apparently these are referred to as special lineage weapons invented during the Qing dynasty, relatively late in history. So martial arts instructors came up with these and developed a system for their use and then passed that usage down, created a tradition. But as far as I can tell, these were never used on the battlefield or in duels. So that makes it a little bit tricky. These are practiced in forms. You can see there are a lot of fancy flowing movements that you wouldn't really use in real world combat. However, considering that this exists and also that some very strange weapons existed in real life, I think we can give our Viking Space Orks a little bit of leeway here and say, you know what, it's not actually that crazy. This, I think, works very well for the lore, because Klingons want a challenge. They want a weapon that requires a lot of skill. Normally, I count that as a disadvantage. If a weapon requires more training time than another, that means that two people with the exact amount of training time under their belt, the one with the more complex weapon is not going to be as good as the one with the more conventional weapon. Even though they spent the same amount of time training, the more difficult one simply requires more. So at the same time, because it's unconventional, it might give the opponent some trouble. Don't overestimate that, by the way. Some people seem to think that just because something is unusual and exotic and unconventional, that means that the enemy won't have any idea what to do with it. No, the basics of fighting with weapons still applies. You know, things like distance, timing, the basics of how you defend yourself, it's still going to be the same. So it's a deliberate choice to put yourself at a disadvantage to gain more honor, because, you know, killing somebody with a melee weapon who's using a rifle or what have you is, yeah, it's more difficult. You can brag more about it. So that makes sense. And if two fight against each other with this weapon, then it's even. Except there's a bit of a side effect here. If a Klingon has a duel of honor, you know, like a ritualized duel with a non-Klingon, they are at quite an advantage, because the non-Klingon is not going to be experienced with this. So they can claim that, well, your prowess will determine if you can, not really. You're putting your combatant at a serious disadvantage because they've never held this, they have no idea how to use it. So yeah, you're kind of cheating a little bit. This is also implied when Quark is supposed to fight a Klingon and basically talks his way out of it because he knows that he has no chance against a trained Klingon warrior with a bat'leth. So he just convinces them that, hey, I'm not going to fight, so you would have to murder me. Where's the honor in that? And he gets away with that, which makes a lot of sense. So what do I like about this? There's definitely some versatility to this design. The ability to use different grips. With a sword, you're generally stuck in a certain position, the grip, unless you're using half swording. But this allows you to do more different things. So for example, if you want to deliver the most powerful strike possible, you have the hands down here. If you want to be a little bit more agile at the cost of power, you grip it further up, and even further, this is for close quarters grappling. And the fact that it is symmetrical in grappling, as soon as you're close and you're binding the opponent's weapon, you can hook their limbs, you can attack from angles, unexpected angles pretty quickly. Like say, you've got the weapon bound up here, now you've got this to suddenly attack the hamstring, for example. Rake it, hook it, you can use the points, with this one or with the original, either way. You can use the points to strike with, you can push with it in various ways. So there are plenty of ways to handle this, to manipulate this weapon and do things that may be difficult for the opponent to quickly respond to. It's easy to overanalyze something in a bad way. Like for example, you can say that a bat'leth is not great for thrusting. Like you can do it to a limited degree, but it's not really good. So makes it bad, right? Well, you can say the same thing about the Falks. This is also not really fantastic for thrusting, and it doesn't even have a guard at all. So this leaves the hand terribly exposed, but it's still a functional weapon. And as long as you are aware of certain limitations, there are plenty of weapons that could be improved, actual real-life weapons that were used in duels or on the battlefield. There are some things to be said against double weapons or mirror designs, however you want to call it. I've ranted about double spears in the past. Basically anytime you have something sharp and or pointy directed at the user, it's not a great idea. You can easily injure yourself with that if you're not being careful. Again, that can be mitigated with training, but a lot of the time it doesn't actually add anything. It's just something awkward that you have to deal with that doesn't really give you any benefit. So that's the case with the bat'leth. You would certainly be better off having a single-sided version of this. So if you turned the bat'leth into a polearm, it would be somewhat similar to this, but with the exception that you still have that blade running all the way down, but then you would make it longer in one direction, but then pretty much stop at the end of the grip. As a polearm, I can hold it like this if I want to, and this particular one here I designed to be double-edged so that you have that option. That's not a problem. However, if this was mirrored and I have the same on this end, now I'm in some trouble because now I can accidentally slice myself. In fact, something very similar happened to me once. Now, granted, at that time I was just messing around for fun, which you shouldn't really do, but that also means that your opponent could exploit that deliberately. Try to force that thing against yourself. It's just something else that you need to be concerned with, However, if it's away from you, and like if this side is blunt, which is the case on a bat'leth, and it's curved forward, now I don't have to worry about it. Well, in this case, I still have to worry about it because of this, but this can be pressed all the way against me, even with force by the opponent, and it's not going to matter. Even if you stumbled and fell onto your own bat'leth, there's very little risk that it would injure you. like this. If it was like that, obviously, yeah, that would most likely mess you up. So this doesn't really stick out all that far beyond the lowest point at which you can grip it. I mean, it's still enough that it's a bit of a concern, but because it's forward swept, it doesn't matter too much. The drawback of that is that the maximum available reach is lower, of course. What I would do if I wanted to design this to be more practical is skip this part, maybe leave like a small spike so you can still use it when grappling, and I would just make this one continuous grip all the way down here, and then give you the option to hold it there, and there you go. You could then still use it in confined spaces, you could still grapple with it, but you could also strike powerfully with it and it wouldn't get as much in the way. There are definitely some good things about it. Again, the hand protection is useful. I'm not going to claim it's as good as a sword, no. Or a polearm, for that matter. Definitely not. I'd rather fight with a two-handed sword, or, you know, a halberd, or even a shorter two-handed axe, or weapon plus shield, etc. But overall, for the intended purpose, particularly if you think about confined spaces, which you may very well encounter on a spaceship, that's pretty useful. You know, the ability to either go for reach or just keep everything nice and retracted and basically push somebody into a corner and get them into confined space where they cannot use their weapon as effectively, and decimating them with this is a solid tactic. One of the problems of such an unconventional design is how on earth would you carry it? Well, okay, not on Earth, but you know what I mean. How would you carry this? You can't really wear it. This is, maybe you could put a strong magnet on your belt and just kind of clip it on, but this is not fantastic. The mek'leth, way easier to carry. I mean, the mek'leth is overall just simpler. I have to say that I actually prefer the first version of the batleth, the one that Kahless made, simply because it's all one continuous grip. We don't have the separation here. This doesn't really add anything. I mean, it adds something visually, I suppose, but it's not as useful as the ability to slide your hand across the entire length of the handle. That's actually way more useful. This way you're not stuck. You don't have to take the hand out, you know, and put it elsewhere. You can just slide it and grab it anywhere you want. That's actually really helpful. The additional blades and spike, I'm not a fan of in terms of offensive use. That's actually better for defensive use, because if you have additional structures here, it will catch an opponent's weapon in between more effectively, so you can catch and pull, or, you know, otherwise control. And I definitely like the proportions and overall shape of the original design. It's a really smart idea for the setting and intended use, and it looks good. It fits Klingons very well. And yeah, I think it's a great design, actually. It's not the most practical thing in the universe, but with specialized training and with the acknowledgement that you don't want the thing that makes it the easiest, you want what takes more skill and what also works quite well in a particular environment like a spaceship, I think it's fine. So yeah. That's enough blah blah. Hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching and have a good one, folks.